You're listening to Eritrean Society podcast, Inspire and Motivate. I am your host, we're back. And now, we have a very special guest, a physician, practicing doctor, writer. She has a book out now called PreMed Survival Guide. She is a humanitarian and a motivational speaker. It's very important for us to continue to inspire and motivate, and this interview is a great way of producing that. Our guest is Dr. Manna, and this is Inspire and Motivate. We had a series of questions, and our first question is, who is Dr. Manna?
That's a great question. That's the kind of question that is asked of medical school applicants, actually. It's like, why medicine? Broad question. I'll say briefly that I am a proud Eritrean American woman. I am an immigrant, a first-generation physician, and I'm also a physician entrepreneur who has a new book out called the PreMed Survival Guide, How to Get Your Mindset Right.
Your IG handle is Motivation MD 101. What's the story behind that, and what motivates you?
I love that. So I created that handle when I was in residency. So when I was completing my training in anaesthesiology in Southern California. And I chose that because motivation, being able to get myself motivated, maintain my motivation, and look for those internal markers of motivation is something that really helped to sustain me throughout my medical education and training. So when I created the Instagram handle, Motivation MD, I thought, okay, what can I use as a name that's going to best reflect, one of the tenets or foundations of part of my life story and what I want to do with this page, which is to really motivate and inspire, which is definitely in line with with your podcast.
What motivated you to become a doctor?
So the funny story is, as a kid, I always knew I had an interest in the natural sciences. So I was interested in geology, astronomy, anything natural science. I just thought it was super fun and interesting. And I had the good fortune of going to an elementary school that was very well resourced, and we had science discovery days. So we had presentations from different professionals across various fields. And one of those days, I got to see a little bit into medicine. I saw my first human brain, and we were learning a little bit about the human brain, et cetera. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is so intense. This is so cool. Like, you and I walking around, we are just one of the most amazing creations ever. When we are healthy and all the systems are working right, it's already like the eighth wonder of the world. And if a system or multiple systems isn't working for some reason, either because of a genetic issue or environmental issue, socioeconomic, et cetera, and that process of trying to heal a person and the body or the system to a better place of functioning, I thought that was so exciting because it felt like there was an opportunity for me to still contribute. I could still discover something new potentially and learn. And I thought that was really exciting. So I decided, okay, I don't have to go deep into the ocean to find something cool. You and me walking around, we're already the coolest.
And how old was you then? What time frame was this?
So we were having the science discovery days each year. So this was around third, fourth grade. And that's when I decided I want to be a doctor. And of course, my parents were like, yes.
I was just going to ask you that.
So many Eritreans and Africans, they want their children to be doctors and engineers, professors, etc. And I was lucky because I came to that interest on my own. I didn't feel forced to do something I didn't want to do. And then as I continued to mature, I realized, okay, I do actually have this interest, and I'm informed by these things that I'm seeing, these experiences that I'm having. And this will allow me to develop a platform where I can impact more people, educate more people, motivate them, etc. And I'm just very blessed and fortunate to have been able to finish and I guess, realize that objective.
So knowing what you wanted to do gave you the motivation to actually go get it. And now you're a doctor. Now you're self-actualized. How has being a doctor impacted your life?
That's an incredible question. So learning and practicing and getting to the point, completing residency in anesthesiology, which is one subspecialty of medicine amongst so many others, I really had the benefit of learning from incredible people who have had so many amazing life experiences and are very experienced in anesthesia. And even more than that, I got to meet doctors from different kinds of ethnicities, and different specialists who I got to learn from because I needed them. I have a certain patient there was a time where I was in the ICU, the intensive care unit. So critically ill patients will go to the ICU, and there's a lot involved in caring for patients who are very sick. And one of those revolving pieces is medications, prescribing the right medication, the right dose at the right frequency, etc. Well, I am not at that point. I wasn't an expert in all kinds of medications. So I relied heavily on the pharmacist. I would always call them, whether it was like 11 p.m., 3 in the morning, like, hey, Dr. So-and-so, I know it's late. I'm sorry, but I just want to make sure this, is that I read that there's this potential, contraindication with this medication. Will I be okay considering these are the other medications the patient's on, etc.? And having that opportunity to really collaborate with great people who were good at what they did empowered me, because I wouldn't have been able to do my own job if I couldn't depend on other people who knew their job very well. And those types of experiences only built upon each other in residency in medical school. And I would say that being a physician impacted my life because I had the good fortune to be witness to very extreme situations that humanity essentially finds itself in. So meaning, I had situations where I would see a young person in their 20s who was in a bad car accident, right? And they, it was a polytrauma. There's multiple things that their body was impacted negative way. And seeing, how fleeting life can be and how much of a gift it is for us to be able to do whatever it is that we do, because we just don't know what's going to happen next. And, other situations where I had the opportunity to, again, witness and have the trust, which is very special, of people who became patients in their most vulnerable periods of their life. And having their trust to know what was going on, to share that information with their family members if appropriate, being able to be a part of their care team, provide their anesthetic, etc., was, it's an incredible opportunity that, you might not just get in another field. So being able to witness the very best of humanity, let's say the birth of a newborn, when two people have been trying for the longest to have a baby, and then finally, after so many years of treatments, they're able to have their first child who's healthy, being able to witness that, which is incredible, in so many other situations. So it has always been a constant learning experience. And we have this phrase in medicine, right, that to be a doctor means that you are a lifetime learner. And it's true. Being a physician means that you're constantly learning. You're learning from patients, nurses, pharmacists, other doctors, respiratory technicians, x-ray techs, everybody. You're learning from everybody all the time. So that's one of the most impactful ways that medicine has affected me.
When reading your book, I knew partial information about getting into medical school. Yet the hardship, the constant behavioral needs needed to successfully complete your studies in school, medical school, and finding a pathway needed to fulfill your goals is extraordinary. Yeah, it's ordinary amongst your peers. Can you explain the time frame it takes to get where you are?
I love how you put that. Because it's true. It's very true. So in the US, to become a physician, so that means being able to have MD after your name or DO. MD is for allopathic medicine. DO is osteopathic medicine. The main difference is the philosophy or approach to health and medicine, essentially. Both of them are doctors. Both of them can prescribe medications. If they choose to be surgeons, they can be, or, primary care physician. Again, it's just a difference in the approach to disease and management. So to become an MD in the United States, you need to complete university education. It can be either going straight to college or university from high school, or going to a JC, junior college, and for 2 years, and then transferring over to university, completing your bachelor's degree, completing prerequisites for medical school or osteopathic school. And then prerequisites are essentially all of the foundational science, physics, and some mathematics. So biology, chemistry, general chemistry, organic chemistry, physics, etc. Those are classes that are usually required to be completed before somebody can apply to medical school. The medical school application process generally takes about a year because there's a lot of moving pieces to it. So there's a primary application where an applicant would need to submit a personal statement. So basically answering questions like you're asking me, like why medicine?
Yeah.
Tell us about a hard time in your life, what you learned from it, etc.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit more about you and the activities that you've done and all of that. In putting in all of your activities, your clinical volunteer experiences, which usually are several hundred hours worth, your MCAT, which is the exam that needs to be taken before entering medical school, and then the secondary application. So more essays.
Okay.
and
What's
then
MCAT what does it stand for, MCAT?
Medical Collegiate Admissions Test.
Okay. So it's kind of like, it's like the graduate exam that you need to take to go to medical school. So, I mean, the MCAT can take anywhere from 3 months to a year to study for. Certain classes, usually the prerequisites will be very helpful to take the MCAT. So it can take up to a year to study for the MCAT. And then the application cycle, like I said, is a year, because after the primary application is submitted, and generally students apply to anywhere from, 20 to 30 to 50 to 60 plus medical schools, because it's a very competitive process. Each medical school may have anywhere from 100 to 200 spots available. And for those 100 to 200 spots, anywhere from 5 to 10,000 people are applying for those same spots. So for this reason, people usually apply broadly to multiple programs to increase their chance of getting accepted. So the primary application needs to be complete. The MCAT needs to be complete. Then secondary applications. So all the schools then send out applications, not to everybody. Everybody doesn't get it. So throughout the process, the application pool is essentially being whittled down. So everyone gets the chance to submit a primary. Some people get the secondary. Then some people get an invitation to interview. Prior to COVID, it was an in-person interview. So that would require travel to, anywhere in the country to interview for the full day. And then after interviews, it's essentially a waiting game where students are waiting to hear back from different programs to see whether or not they've been either accepted, waitlisted, or rejected. So it's a long process. It takes a year, but if an applicant's able to successfully
go through that process, interview, and get accepted, then they'll be able to start medical school that following summer.
I mean, you mentioned your book, the PreMed Survival Guide. So let's get into that more. For me, this book, it gave me like the understanding of how you did it. And there was a lot of knowledge, a lot of tips, pro tips as well. Was you obliged to provide information to others to gain entrance into the medical field?
Yeah, I love that. So I never felt obligated like I had to. It was something that I was excited to do. I wanted to do because I was so fortunate to receive that from so many other people, my mentors, my sponsors, my different summer enrichment programs that I was a part of. So many people had poured into me and supported me throughout my journey. I was only happy to pay it forward. So I had the benefit of great mentors from ABWP, for example, the Association of Black Women Physicians.
Okay.
Busy physicians, busy surgeons. One of my mentors is an ear, nose, and throat surgeon. And they took the time out of their lives to support me, to encourage me, to say, hey, it's been a long time since I've heard from you. How are you? Are you okay? How's things going? Okay, let's go to lunch. Let's go to dinner. Let's talk about it, etc. So having that experience, I'm only happy to continue that tradition of sharing that information, sharing that inspiration with other people, because it's very hard to do things by yourself in life. Anything, it's very hard to do alone. So we need each other, and especially African, Caribbean, Black, Afro-Latino aspiring physicians. There's so few of us in medicine as physicians that it just becomes paramount for us to collaborate and support each other.
Yeah. I mean, in the book, when the things that you described, and you had this kind of like self-actualization, you knew where you was going, you knew what you was doing, the way you networked, and like you planned perfectly. And I just wanted to know, how can someone that's not really good at networking or doesn't have the ability or the someone that's not comfortable in doing the networking part, what would you say to them?
It first starts again with where you want to be and why do you want to be there. And once you are firm in that objective, then it's a matter of making a plan. Well, I want to be a doctor. I want to be an engineer. I want to be the world's best podcast host and media mogul, right? Well, okay, I know I really want it, and I know what my reason is for that, because people inspired me and I want to inspire others, or because I don't see anybody like me who's doing this and I want to be that person who's filling that space, whatever that why is, because that gives you power. It gives you fortitude to be able to persist. So even if someone isn't comfortable networking because they consider themselves to be an introvert, or maybe it's a language barrier and you're an immigrant, you don't feel like you'll be taken as seriously, or there may be a stereotype against you, whatever the case may be, knowing where you want to be and why will give you that inner strength, that mental fortitude to put yourself out there. So there's this joke I used to say when I was in residency. So you're very busy, and basically you go hospital, home, restaurant, home, hospital, home. That's basically the schedule, right? Well, let's say you want to date, you want to meet somebody because you want to marry, etc., whatever timeline. Well, you might meet someone at work, or you might meet someone in your apartment complex or whatever, your neighborhood. But if you don't put yourself in the opportunity to meet other people, how are you going to meet someone that could eventually be your next boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, whatever? So it's the same concept. It's opportunities can't find you if you're not there. You have to be there for that opportunity. And essentially, that's how I think about networking. So when there is a student who's in high school, university, or they graduated, or even it's a mature adult who wants to make a transition from one career to another, which, by the way, lots of people do that in medicine. We have lots of non-traditional students who either came from different fields or they're mature adults who have children, etc. So it's common. If you have that dream to be a doctor, you can still do it no matter your age.
Brilliant.
So for networking, put yourself in the space for opportunities to find you. They say opportunity favors the prepared, and it's true. If you come prepared, you present yourself well, you're nice, you're respectful, you have a genuine interest in whoever you're speaking to, they're going to like you. They want to keep talking to you. They want to help you. You're working on whatever your path is, your goal is. People like winners. They want to be associated with winners and people who are doing things. So when you are working on your own path and you're self-actualizing, as you said so brilliantly, people are naturally attracted to that. So that's my approach to networking.
Brilliant. We're going to get more into your book, The PreMed Survival Guide. For me, when I read it as, okay, it's about pre-med, but for me, it was motivational. The things that you said had a strong spirit. It reminded me of the book, like Rich Dad, Poor Dad, even Machiavelli, like The Prince. No, it did. And also The Secret. I mean, it had hints of those flavors. I mean, what inspired you to write a book with the narrative you chosen?
So when I came as I was concluding my final year of residency in anesthesiology at a level 1 trauma center, I started realizing that part of the reason that I had the challenges that I had is because I was approaching this from such a novice mindset. I thought sometimes, well, if I just do my job and I do it as well as I can, then that's it. That's what counts. That's what matters. And I realized, nope, it's a lot more than that. Yeah. It's not just, can you do the job? Do you know the information? Did you do well on the exam? It's, how are you building relationships? How are you at presenting yourself? Those are the things that we hear when we're talking about just in general corporate life. It's not what you know, it's who you know.
Yeah.
Same thing applies in medicine. It's not just, did you know the mechanism of action and the contraindications of this drug and when to apply it appropriately. It was also, how well did you work with the other people in the operating room? How well are you able to communicate your plan? How well do you manage your emotions when you're tired, hungry, angry, sad, etc.? Because that impacts how you communicate with people, how you conduct yourself, all of that. So I learned a lot of things the hard way, although I had amazing mentors who were just instrumental in me persevering and persisting throughout medical training. There was a lot that I learned the hard way because, that's sometimes how we just learn, is through firsthand experience. And I realized, man, if I knew this stuff earlier, I could have done things so much differently. Yeah. And I probably would have set myself up better. And part of it, I realized, because, you know what, maybe it's because I'm a first generation immigrant. Because if you don't have that type of knowing on a personal level in your family, so if you don't have, let's say, older siblings or your parents who have gone through a similar format or pathway, can say, hey, make sure you study and you do well, but make sure also that you socialize enough, even if you're tired, because X, Y, and Z, etc. So those are some of the lessons that I learned. And I realized that, instead of gatekeeping that information and keeping it to myself so that I can benefit from it moving forward, to put it into a very concise format in an ebook, in an audiobook, and to include an interactive digital workbook so that people like me who are underrepresented in medicine, who are immigrants, who are first generation, can get this information early to identify not only is medicine right for them, but also to have access to someone who looks like them, who can tell them, hey, you can do it despite all these challenges. And to have a convenient way to access information, because oftentimes we don't have doctors in our families. We haven't seen another Eritrean physician. We haven't seen an African physician. We haven't seen another Black physician, etc. So being able to circulate this resource that's convenient and concise I thought would just be a powerful way to empower aspiring physicians.
Your book is broken down into 4 chapters. I love the titles, and it makes so much sense what you've written, like the emotions and fears, your why, and also the examples you gave showed the character needed, the confidence needed. How do you produce that drive? But firstly, how do you define your why?
Well, for anyone who's listening, you definitely got to read the PreMed Survival Guide so that you can get that strategic framework, because it's hard. Yeah. Sometimes we think sometimes it can be very simple, right? Well, I want to be a doctor because I want to help people. I want to be a doctor because my parents told me to. I'm good at science, and why not? You can make good money and you have a good life. There's nothing wrong with that. What I urge readers and future doctors to get an idea of before they start their intensive journey is to go deeper than that. Because when you are in the hospital or in the clinic and you haven't slept because you've been working the night shift, or you've done a couple of calls and you're still tired, and now you're dealing with people who have different personalities, they don't think like you, and you get frustrated, or so many different things that come up. Is that why? Is your answer enough to make you keep going? Because I'll tell you right now, so many times so many of us, not just me, so many doctors, we think, wow, did I really need to put myself through this? Because I'm smart, I could do something else. I can make money, I can help people in other ways. Why am I doing this? Because the training is so rigorous, and it has to be, because what's required is such a high price to be able to care for someone's health. It's very precious, and it can be it's a high stakes situation. So naturally the process is very rigorous and essentially requires so many gauntlets and so many hoops to jump through to make sure, do you really want it? Are you sure you're going to stick to it? It's really hard. There's a lot of information. Okay, now that you got the information, make sure you can apply it. And there's so many challenges that will require you to have a very powerful why. And that's why I made that the first chapter, define your why.
You've got great quotes. Even you mentioned a few quotes today, but you've mentioned in your book. I don't want to give your book away, don't
give it all away.
So
I'm just kidding.
So one was, success is earned, hard work is the rent that's due. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah. So hard work is the rent that's due every day, Monday through Saturday. Yeah, it's true. Because, so I mentioned earlier that just the application cycle to try to get into medical school takes 1 year. That's just to apply. To get to that point, you need, of course, several years behind that to get prepared to not only get your bachelor's degree, but also to take all the prerequisites, to be involved in various activities that enable you to take a leadership role, to have clinical experiences. There's just so many steps that are required to even get to the point of applying. Yeah. And then once you apply, that's its own gauntlet to get through that process. We're not even mentioning the MCAT, which is its own process that's just so challenging. And then you get into medical school, and guess what? It goes from 0 to 100 very fast. The common phrase to get an idea of what it's like is, it's like drinking from a fire hose. So fire hose, high pressure water, right? That's coming through a tube. Purpose is to put out a fire. Well, in medical school, it's information. It's medical knowledge. Yeah. And you're trying to drink from something, and it's an overwhelming amount of information that's coming at you very fast. So that is medical school. And essentially, in a nutshell, that's very much how it is. You think, oh, okay, at college, this is hard, it's challenging, and it is. And then you go to medical school, and it's another level of hard. And then you go to residency, and that's another level. So every level requires a higher level of you. And that's where that statement comes from. Hard work is the rent that's due every day to obtain success.
Brilliant. You said use your fuel. How do you use that fuel to actually, make a positive out of it?
Transmutation. You take something and you turn it into something else. And Napoleon Hill has a great book, and he talks about transmutation. And I definitely recommend that to all of the listeners out there, because there's some great knowledge that really just transcends time, even though it's an older book. Napoleon Hill. So all of us have a certain amount of energy each day, right? It's a finite amount. We can optimize it through sleep, spiritual development, food, drink, who we interact with, what we think, all of this stuff, right? But at the beginning of each day, you have a certain amount of energy, goes up, goes down, or whatever. So when we encounter negative people, it's a type of energy that we can either accept, reject, or we use it. And it's very hard to handle criticism or negativity for anybody, because none of us like negative things, right? Yeah. We want to be supported and loved for who we are and what we're trying to do. And that's a natural state of being. There's nothing wrong with that. So when we are trying to do something that is different, something that is considered by some people to be strange, whatever, we're going to encounter resistance. Yeah. It's natural. It's annoying, it's frustrating, but that is literally part of life. So it's up to each of us as individuals to decide, what are we going to do with the energy that is being received and the energy that we already have in our own. So eventually we'll come to an understanding where we realize that to conserve our energy for our goals, for our dreams, we have to protect that energy. And protecting that energy means being able to be discerning when other people are telling us stuff that we don't like. Sometimes people are coming from a good place, but it still is negative. Say a relative, a teacher, a friend says, oh, you want to be a doctor? That's too hard. Like, school takes forever, and you're going to be old, and you're going to be single forever, or it takes forever to make money, and so many things that they can say. Well, maybe they're telling you because they're actually worried for you. They think, oh, this person is nice, they're smart, they could do anything else, something that doesn't have to be so demanding on their life. They could find the joy, the success somewhere else. And maybe that could be true. There's nothing wrong with that. But again, if you know your why, if you know why you're doing it, and you check in with yourself and you realize, okay, nope, this is still what I want to do, I'm committed, I'm dedicated, then you can, now when you hear that type of talk, you can say, okay, you're coming from your understanding. You don't understand who I am, where I'm going, what I'm trying to do, what my purpose is in life as far as I know it. Thank you for your words, and then move on. You don't have to engage them, right? Or another way is to think of it as trying to prove some people wrong. Let's say a school advisor or a teacher says, because your performance in class or school is not good for whatever reason, could be learning disability, could be home environment is challenging, could be money, because everyone's got something. And they say, oh, so-and-so, you'll never be this. That's too hard for you. There's nothing in your current performance that shows me you could do that. So how you are today doesn't mean that's how you are tomorrow. How a student, a kid, adult is today is not who they're going to be 10, 20, 30 years from now. So once we all realize that people can only speak from their own experience, And sometimes that experience is very limiting. You realize, okay, it's not that personal. You really think I can't do it because you can't do it or because you don't know anyone who's done it. So of course you think I can't do it. Okay, no big deal. Moving on. So people who want to become physicians are going to encounter that a lot. I encountered that throughout my journey. I had, in my opinion, well-meaning. I don't think they hated me or had it out for me. Yeah. They genuinely didn't know if I was essentially good enough or smart enough to be a doctor. And I thought to myself, well, you're not a doctor. Yeah. What do you know? I'm a doctor today. So, obviously your words don't define my future. Yeah. So we realize that someone's words does not define your future. What they say to you is coming from their own level of understanding. The less they understand or the less they experience, the less positively that they're going to be able to speak to you. So those are some things that I kept in mind throughout my pathway.
And when they see you as a doctor, they get motivated themselves. They say, oh, well, you know what, I want to do this. And they go out, do what they want to do, if that makes sense. So
absolutely. Absolutely.
It's a plus. See, now is another one in the book, which is silence the noise, the 4 steps technique. I mean, do you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, it's essentially what I mentioned regarding a structured approach to handling negativity from other people. Once you are able to be organized in your approach and you make a plan and you stick with it, and then you test it out like an experiment and see, does it work? Does it not work? And then you adjust it according to your needs and your environment. And then you try it again. Does it work? Does it not work? And then you get to a certain number of iterations where you realize, okay, this is what's working for me. I'm going to keep this and move forward with it until I have new data for my environment that says, okay, you need to modify. And for all the listeners who want to become physicians or their family members want to become physicians, it is very normal to change your mind and to change your approach from year to year, from environment to environment. I did that several times and it's normal. So many physicians do it. You think, oh, I want to be a doctor and I work at a hospital. And then later you realize, okay, you want to work in an academic center, or you want to go into private practice, or you want to be a physician entrepreneur or whatever. So changing your mind is okay, because as people, we grow, we develop, we change. So that means that our plans will have to change accordingly.
That's brilliant. You also had with that, mantras. Like a lot of people don't use mantras and affirmations, but clearly you mentioned some things, the I will mentality. I mean, I don't know how to say it, but affirmations is like when you say aloud the things that whether you want to get or you want to kind of improve in life, I guess. So you used it as a I will mentality. I will get certain grades, or I will become a doctor. I mean, how has that impacted? How did that actually for you? Did it work? Did that work for you?
It did. I've used different sets of affirmations throughout my life, actually. I was introduced to the formal concept of affirmations when I was between my first and second year of university at UCLA. I had the great opportunity to be part of a prep program, UCLA Prep, just for pre-medical and pre-health students, to give them the boost that they need essentially to become competitive applicants. And one of the speakers was this amazing woman, so sweet, so smart, and she made us do these affirmations. And some of us are like, oh, we feel a little like uncomfortable saying these things. But even today, I remember parts of it. She would say, let me see if I can remember. Oh, so one of the affirmations she would have us do in the middle of the day between classes. She would say, I am strong, loving, and capable. You are strong, loving, and capable. We are strong, loving, and capable. And I remember the first time I thought this is kind of weird to say this out loud in front of people. However, I realized that there is a power to training your own mind by what you say. It's a feedback loop. So it's not just other people, what their words are that go into our brain. It's also what we are saying. It also goes into our brain. So when we are cognizant of that, we realize, hey, if I say I'm stupid to myself a lot, I start to believe that I'm stupid. Even if I think I have some strength somewhere, I'm going to think at the core foundation, I'm just not that smart. But if you start telling yourself, even when you don't believe it yet, I'm smart and I'm capable. I'm going to be a doctor. I'm going to get great grades. I'm going to help a lot of people. I'm going to make myself proud. Whatever that affirmation is, and you repeat it enough, when you're not saying it, now when you're going around in your life, you actually start hearing what you told yourself. So now if you get into a situation, let's say you make a mistake in class, you didn't do well or something happened, right? Some issue, then you're going to reroute your brain essentially. Yeah. So before you might have said, oh, I was such an idiot. I made this mistake. I shouldn't have done that. Sometimes we're hard on ourselves. But if you are doing these positive affirmations, you're saying positive things and you're being nice to yourself. Now, when you make that mistake, you're thinking, darn, that sucks. Oh, well, okay, I'll do better next time. Everyone makes mistakes. It's okay. I'll do better next time. Now I know there's another way to do it. So essentially, we can rewire our brains to be more kind, more thoughtful to ourselves.
And it stays on your subconscious. So if it's something negative, it's at the back of your mind. If it's something positive, it sticks on your subconscious.
If it's okay, I would like to finish a thought that I had about what you just said about affirmations.
Yeah.
So I'm talking about rewiring the brain, but a simple way to think about it is this. The way most of our brains have been developed is to protect ourselves. Yeah. So we can hang on to negativity very easily because, in a primal way, we are trying to protect ourselves. Same thing with fear. Purpose of fear is to protect ourselves for survival. And sometimes those emotions can hijack our logic. So when we are speaking positively to ourselves, we're going to notice that it kind of takes longer sometimes. It may not take long at all, but it might take a while to really convince ourselves, hey, I am strong, I am capable. This season of negativity or trials and tribulations, they will pass. Whatever it is that you want to tell yourself to get you through that rough patch, it can take time, and that is normal. There's nothing wrong with you if you feel like, wow, why do these negative things I think about myself, it's so hard to stop thinking about it. It's natural, and we can overcome that.
And what is from actually affirmations working, what is success to you? How would you define success?
So I used to think success was very black and white, meaning for example, if I got an A, I was successful. If I didn't get an A, I failed. If I got accepted into this program, I was successful. If I didn't, because I was rejected or whatever, then I failed, and therefore I'm a failure. And I realized that was a very unhealthy way of defining success, because at the end of the day, someone may start attributing their self-worth based off of external metrics of performance. And that's just an inhumane way to treat ourselves, and then B, a very inaccurate way to treat ourselves, because we are more than just letters on a paper or numbers on a paper. We're human beings with emotions and talents and relationships and different parts of our lives don't encapsulate who we are as individuals, and it doesn't define or restrict our full potential. So my definition of success has matured since then. I don't think of it as an all or nothing event. If I didn't do this or people didn't respond exactly like this, then it failed and I failed. And, no, I think of it more of, I see things more of an opportunity to grow, and it's an opportunity to learn more about myself and others. I've heard this so many times from other people in podcasts and interviews. They say, oh, I learned a lot about myself. And as a kid, I thought, don't you already know everything about yourself? What else is there to learn? And then I grew up and I realized the answer is there's a whole lot more to learn, because we're not always as self-aware as we think we are. And we start realizing how our previous experiences in life, in work, in love, etc., impact our personality or our approach or our reactions to things. And as you start to tease apart how all those things have interacted with each other to impact ourselves, we realize, hey, we have some power over our lives in terms of how we can react to things. Let me improve myself. Let me be at peace with myself, and let me fulfill my purpose as best I can, as much as I know how. So that is how I come to approach success now.
I want to talk about the struggles you had writing the book, because I'm sure it wasn't as easy as, or maybe it was, but what struggles did you have writing this book?
I was very fortunate that the writing process for me was actually very easy. I've been writing since I was a kid, and prior to, actually there's another book that will be coming out at some point in time, which is a work of nonfiction.
Yeah.
It's like a romance thriller kind of book. So I've always had a passion for writing because it was a vehicle for catharsis for me at so many points in time. So sitting down and writing the book was actually pretty easy. And being able to organize it was also pretty straightforward, because I was writing from life experiences. I've lived this. I am going through training. I am a doctor. I am a first-generation immigrant. These are experiences that so many people like me encounter. These are challenges that a lot of us face. So for me, it was, I think at times I was surprised by, the vulnerability in terms of being very open about some of my experiences, just because when we create something and then put it out in the public for consumption, whether it's a book, a podcast, whatever, and we are a creative individual in some way, we think, oh man, they're going to judge the product, the creation, and then it's going to reflect back on the person who created that. And so there's always that possibility of having a negative reception for something that you put in energy and passion and vulnerability into. So I had to realize that, that's just something that can happen, and it's okay. There's going to be people who won't like it, and there's going to be people who love it. And I realized, I'm ready for the people who love it. So I'm just not going to worry too much about anyone else who has something negative to say about it. And I've been very fortunate to have great positive reviews, people who really resonated with the messages and who appreciate the frameworks and the strategies and the tips. I've had doctors who are in practice for either a few years or decades say, I wish I had this when I was younger, because this would have made such a difference. And I thought, exactly. I was like, that's why I wrote it, because I realized the same thing. And just because it wasn't there when I was coming up through the ranks doesn't mean that it can't be there for someone else. So it was a great experience. I would say, because I have a high standard of excellence for myself, the hardest part was saying I'm done with the book. Because writing it was easy, but then editing it was a very labor intensive process. Of course, I had professional editors go over the book. And then every time I looked at it with a new set of eyes, I'd say, oh, let me write this. Let me change this. Let me put this story instead. Because I was always chasing the most concise and emotive way that I could share the lessons and experiences that I had. So getting to a point to say, okay, I'm done. I've edited this as much as I can. It's clear. It makes sense. It resonates. There's something real that's being transmitted through these words. There's no like extra fluff. And so when I got to that point, I was like, all right, I'm done. It's time to put it out.
How long did it take?
Experience.
How long did it take?
For what part?
The writing process and editing and just getting it from start to finish.
I wrote it within a few months. And so essentially the ratio is, it was like a 3-to-1 ratio. The amount of time that was spent editing was far longer than the time spent writing.
So thriving despite challenges. Many people have gone to the hospitals, and sometimes it kind of like the question I'm trying to ask is, how do you cope? Sometimes you have an influx of so many patients. How do you cope with the whole, even giving bad news, or how do you cope with it? How do you deal with it? Because it feels to me when I see things like that, it's very difficult for a human being to deal with every day. So how do you keep, buoyant? How do you keep alive, if that makes sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. So that question has so many answers. One is you handle each person one at a time. And when you know that there are 20 patients in clinic, or you have X amount of surgeries for the day that you're providing the anesthetic for, you just focus on who is in front of you, and you do your best by that person and work with your team as well as you can, so that you don't overwhelm yourself thinking about everything else that's coming next. And another factor is practice. As a doctor, you get a lot of practice in how to deal with tough situations. So giving bad news, or, experiencing traumatic, instances in other people's lives, or your own life, as you're also, helping other people with their health. So practice, you get those types of experiences throughout the 4 years of medical school, which can be longer if you take a research year. And then residency is anywhere from 3 years for primary care specialties in the US to potentially 7 years or longer, depending on the type of surgical specialty. So you have so many years and tens of thousands of hours worth of experience and practice, where you are pushing yourself to the limit and demanding the very best from yourself, so that you can help someone else and their family through a difficult time. And, we're human.
Yeah.
Doctors, like anyone else, are people. Doctors tend to be hard on themselves. They have high expectations, and the healthcare systems that they operate within have high expectations of them. So it can be very challenging, because, burnout is a huge, huge issue for all medical providers, including physicians. So having that self-awareness and a support system and healthy coping mechanisms to deal with the tough times, and also the courage to say, you know what, this format doesn't work for me. I need to change my schedule. I need to change my work environment. I need to do this and that. Shortly after completing residency, I decided that I wanted to take the leap and invest in myself and actualize my dreams and goals of being a physician entrepreneur. I've had all these books in my mind in terms of stories I wanted to write, and I decided I'm going to go for it. I'm going to start with the PreMed Survival Guide. I'm going to create my publishing company. I'm going to work with amazing people in digital health and health tech and ed tech to create content that inspires and empowers people throughout all walks of life according to their needs. And having the courage to say, okay, well, this is the path that I want to create for myself, which may be different than other people's, is something that can help us when we are experiencing hardship from either because of schedule or personal issues. It's to realize that we have some power in our lives to impact what we're doing with our time and how we are enjoying our time, and to check in with ourselves to say, hey, do I still like what I'm doing? Yes or no? Okay, well then what can I modify so that I can be healthier, happier, and live a more fulfilling life?
And how has the pressure, like, how has the COVID, how have you dealt with COVID-19 as a doctor, as work-life balance as well? I mean, how have you dealt with COVID-19?
Yeah, so when I was completing my training, it was in the throes of COVID, prior to, any kind of a protocol approach, or at least a nationalized approach to it. And in the beginning, it was scary. It was at times overwhelming. I was very fortunate to be part of a healthcare system that did an incredible job of providing us with PPE, personal protective equipment. So we weren't struggling like some other people were to get protective equipment. Although in the beginning, the N95 situation the supply was very low. So we were reusing our masks to make them last because there just wasn't that enough to go around. So it was I'm not sure what word anyone can use to describe the pandemic, either at that time in 2020 or even now, except that it is a global phenomenon that's impacted us in all of our lives in so many different ways, from the way that we communicate to there being more Zoom meetings, less in-person encounters, to the way that we learn. So many classrooms are now blending in that digital format, and to the way that we think about life and health and how serious maybe, I think a lot more people may approach infectious diseases, et cetera, or trust in organizations and governments when people are scared and it involves their health. There's just so much more that goes into the process of educating people, of being able to maintain the trust that they have in you so that they'll listen to what you have to say and that you'll listen to what they have to say. There's just so much that goes into it. So I don't think there's anybody who can say that they haven't been impacted by COVID-19. It's definitely an unprecedented worldwide phenomenon.
Okay, so to leave you with, you mentioned Leslie Brown, the motivational speaker, J.K. Rowling, the writer of the acclaimed Harry Potter literatures, and Dr. Patricia Bath, not only a doctor but also the inventor of laser cataract surgery. She also said, believe in the power of truth, that the limits of science are not the limits of imagination. What would you leave us with? What would you, if you had to quote something, or what would Dr. Manna say to us?
Well, I'm not sure I can, have something that's better than what the late Dr. and great Patricia Bath has said. I will say that self-kindness matters. Self-compassion is of paramount importance. All of us are treasures in our own way, And in order to fulfill our life purpose, taking care of ourselves is definitely a priority.
And where can people find you? And if you can give us your directions to find the book, the ebook, where can we find the ebook?
So the PreMed Survival Guide can be found at drmanna.com. That's DoctorManna.com. So drmanna.com. You'll find the ebook, the audiobook, and the interactive digital workbook there. And I'm also on social. You could find me on Instagram at motivationmd_101. Again, that's motivationmd_101. And you'll find me there. And I do all things on pre-med motivation, helpful tips, strategies, and all that good stuff.
Thank you. It's been fascinating and motivational. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me.
I don't need a coach. I don't need advice.